Bizarre forgotten kingdoms buried by time to fall asleep to the question rises softly, like incense curling from a forgotten altar. It lingers in the thin mountain air. How does a kingdom strong enough to command oceans and deserts simply learn to be silent? How does power, once spoken in gold and stone, loosen its grip on the world and allow itself to be carried away by dust and wind? High in the Ethiopian highlands, where the earth lifts itself toward the sun, Axum once stood awake. The land there is ancient, older than memory, cut with deep valleys and crowned with plateaus where clouds drift low enough to brush the skin. In the early centuries of the Common Era, this place became the heart of an empire that listened to the pulse of the world and bent it to its rhythm. Axum rose not with the clamor of sudden conquest, but with the steady confidence of something that understood its own destiny. Stone pillared stelae were raised toward the sky, taller than many buildings of their age, carved as if they were doors meant for giants. They pierced the horizon like frozen prayers, each one a declaration that this kingdom believed in eternity. Palaces spread across the hills, their walls catching the light of dawn, their courtyards echoing with footsteps, now long erased. Coins were struck with the faces of kings whose eyes still stare outward, calm and assured, as if they never doubted that their reign would be remembered. Axum sat at the meeting place of worlds. Africa breathed at its back. Arabia lay just beyond the narrow waters of the Red Sea, and further still were the distant lands of Rome and India. Ships left Axumite ports heavy with ivory, gold, frankincense, and slaves, their sails swelling with winds that carried not only goods, but ideas and faiths. Caravans crossed the desert in slow, patient lines, bells chiming faintly in the heat, while the sea listened and obeyed, opening paths for trade that reshaped the ancient economy. The kings of Axum called themselves rulers of land and sea, and for a time, the claim did not sound like arrogance. Their names traveled far, etched into foreign records and whispered in marketplaces thousands of miles away. This was a kingdom that minted its own money when many still traded by weight and word. A kingdom that understood symbols, power, and the quiet authority of permanence. And yet, beneath this grandeur, something delicate began to shift. The chronicles grow thin, names repeat, then vanish, victories go unrecorded, defeats unnamed. The voice that once spoke clearly through stone and metal begins to soften, as if choosing restraint over proclamation. Temples dedicated to ancient gods give way to churches, their crosses rising where older symbols once stood. Axum embraces a new faith, becoming one of the first great Christian kingdoms. And with that transformation comes both renewal and tension, a reorientation of soul and state. The world around Axum is changing as well. Trade routes are not fixed things. They are living currents, sensitive to politics, climate, and the rise of rival powers. Ports farther north grow more attractive. New empires learn the language of commerce and speak it fluently. The Red Sea, once so attentive, begins to listen elsewhere. The land itself may have grown weary. Fields that fed generations begin to thin under relentless cultivation. Rains shift, soil erodes. What once yielded abundance now asks for rest that cannot be granted. A kingdom built on balance finds itself slowly leaning, just enough that the tilt becomes dangerous. There are whispers of conflict, though no grand epic survives to tell them. Perhaps enemies press from the edges, testing borders already strained. Perhaps there were wars too small to frequent, too painful to memorialize. Or perhaps the most devastating struggles were internal fractures of belief, power, and loyalty that left no clear victor and no single moment of collapse. Then there are darker murmurs, the kind history rarely preserves with certainty, plagues that move silently through crowded cities, illnesses that empty homes without leaving scars on stone, deaths that come without drama, without banners or battles, only absence. If such shadows passed through Axum, they left behind no monuments, only gaps. What remains today are fragments, scattered like the pieces of a broken crown. Stelae lie, toppled, some broken, others still standing but weathered, their carvings softened by centuries of sun and rain. Palaces have sunk into the earth, their outlines barely visible beneath grass and rubble. Inscriptions cling to rock faces, words half erased, sentences ending abruptly as if time itself grew tired of listening. The kings are still there, but only as impressions, faces worn smooth on coins, names that echo faintly without stories attached. They do not shout their triumphs, they do not explain their failures, they simply remain, pressed into the material world, asking to be noticed. There is no single night when Axum fell, no invading army whose banners were planted in the heart of the city. No final king dragged from a throne. Instead, there is a long dusk, a gradual dimming, a sense that life continued, but the center no longer held the same gravity. People did not vanish. Faith did not die. The land was not abandoned. Axum did not end. It transformed, thinning into something quieter, something less visible to distant chroniclers. The capital shifted, power dispersed. Memory loosened its grip. Walking among the ruins now, one feels the weight of that continuity. This is not a place of sudden ruin, but of lingering presence. The stones do not scream of catastrophe, they murmur of endurance. The air feels heavy with what was never said, with decisions made slowly, perhaps reluctantly, as generations chose. Survival over splendor. The wind moves carefully through the broken stone, threading itself between fallen pillars and worn steps. It sounds almost deliberate, as if searching, as if hoping to find something misplaced. A crown, perhaps, or the certainty that once lived here. Axum reminds us of a truth that history often resists. Not all empires burn. Not all kingdoms fall to violence. Some simply exhale. They loosen their hold on the world and allow themselves to become background, then landscape, then silence. In that silence, there is no failure, only change. The silent crown of Axum was not stolen. It was set down, gently, and left where time could find it. And time, patient and unyielding, did what it always does. It covered the throne with dust, softened the sharp edges of memory, and let the kingdom sleep. Tonight, as the darkness settles and the mind drifts, Axum still stands somewhere between stone and forgetting, a kingdom that ruled seas and deserts, now ruling only the quiet thoughts of those who listen closely enough to hear the echo of a power that chose not to shout its ending. The silence Axum left behind is not empty. It is full in the way a church remains full long after the candles have burned out. It holds the warmth of prayers once spoken, the rhythm of feet once moving through streets now broken and uneven. Even in absence, the kingdom breathes. At night, when the highlands cool and the stars settle into their ancient patterns, the ruins seem to listen. The stelae cast long shadows that stretch like sundials without hours, measuring a time that no longer belongs to calendars. Each stone feels like a sentence interrupted, a thought left unfinished, waiting for a voice that will never return to complete it. Perhaps that is the final mystery of Axum, not why it disappeared, but why it did not insist on being remembered. Other empires carved their endings into history with fire and blood, forcing their final moments into the minds of those who came after. Axum chose another path. It allowed itself to be absorbed into the land, into faith, into the quiet persistence of people who carried its spirit without carrying its name. There is something profoundly human in that surrender. Power, once absolute, learning humility, glory, once radiant, consenting to dim. The silent crown was not shattered. It was passed inward, worn invisibly by generations who no longer ruled seas, but still lived beneath the same sky. And so the wind continues its gentle search through broken stone, not to reclaim what was lost, but to remember what once was enough. In that motion, soft, endless, patient, the story of Axum finds its true ending, not as a warning, not as a tragedy, but as a lullaby sung by the earth itself, a reminder whispered to those who listen in the dark. Even the greatest kingdoms are temporary guests, and sometimes the most enduring legacy is the grace of a quiet goodbye. And in that quiet goodbye, something deeper stirs, because silence is not the same as forgetting. The land remembers even when people do not. The stones remember weight. The soil remembers footsteps. The air remembers names that were once spoken, daily and then slowly, mercifully, allowed to rest. Long after the last royal procession dissolved into dust, long after the final coin was struck and passed from hand to hand, Axum became something rarer than an empire. It became a presence, without ambition, a place that no longer demanded the world's attention, yet never entirely released it. Travelers who came centuries later found no throne to kneel before, no court to impress, no banner snapping in the wind. They found churches that stayed quiet, enduring, carved into the faith of the land. Christianity did not erase Axum, it absorbed it, like water soaking into stone. The old symbols did not vanish, they slept beneath new ones. The kingdom's pulse slowed, but its heart did not stop. There's an unsettling comfort in that thought, that a civilization can loosen its grip without tearing itself apart. That continuity does not always require dominance. Axum's people learned to live without the weight of empire, to carry forward only what was necessary: belief, Memory, language, land. Perhaps this is why the mystery endures. Historians search for the moment of collapse, the decisive fracture, the dramatic end, but Axum refuses to give them one. It denies the satisfaction of a clean conclusion. Instead, it offers a blur, a long fading edge where one era bleeds gently into another. Standing among the ruins, one senses that the stones are not mourning. They are resting. Their work is done. They have held the sky long enough. Now they lie where they fell, unashamed, unhurried, content to be weathered rather than worshipped. The silent crown remains unseen, but not lost. It exists in the rhythm of the highlands, in the measured patience of a culture that endured without spectacle. It exists in the knowledge that greatness does not need an ending to be complete. As night deepens and the mind drifts toward sleep, Axum lingers like a final breath before dreaming, not loud, not insistent, just present. A kingdom that once commanded the world, now content to watch it pass, teaching us softly, endlessly, that even power can learn how to let go. And as the world turns on, indifferent yet unchanged, Axum remains where it has always been, neither fully gone nor fully here. It lingers in the spaces between certainty and doubt, between what can be measured and what can only be felt. The kingdom does not demand explanation. It resists being solved. Like a half-remembered dream, it fades when stared at directly, but returns the moment one stops trying to grasp it. The highlands cradle this memory with a steady patience. Morning light spills over stone the same way it did centuries ago, touching the broken edges of pillars and warming the ground where palaces once breathed. Birds settle where courtiers once stood. Grass grows where gold once glittered. Life continues, not in defiance of history, but because of it. There is a strange mercy in this kind of ending. Axum was not humiliated by defeat, not erased by a conqueror's hand. It was allowed to age, to grow quiet, to trade the sharp voice of authority for the softer language of endurance. In a world that often remembers only what explodes or collapses, Axum chose to disappear by becoming ordinary again. Perhaps that is why his story is suited for the night. It does not jolt the listener awake with horror or spectacle. It settles, instead, like a low flame, inviting reflection rather than fear. It asks us to consider what we expect from endings, and why we are so uneasy with those that do not announce themselves. As sleep approaches, the image of the silent crown grows clearer, not as an object, but as a feeling. The feeling of something set down with care, a power willingly released, of a civilization that understood, in its final unspoken wisdom, that permanence is an illusion, but continuity is not. And so Axum rests, not buried, not erased, simply quiet, a kingdom folded gently into time, waiting not to be rediscovered, but to be listened to by those who understand that the softest stories often last the longest, and that sometimes the most profound farewell is the one spoken without words. In that listening, something subtle unfolds. The mind, drifting closer to sleep, begins to understand that Axum's story was never meant to be held tightly. It was meant to pass through, like wind through tall grass, leaving motion without possession. The kingdom's greatness was not in how loudly it ruled, but in how quietly it learned to endure what came after. There are places in the ruins where the ground feels warmer, as if the earth itself is still holding on to old heat, not fire memory, the memory of hands shaping, stone with intention, of voices lifted in trade and prayer, of kings who believed the world could be ordered, and of ordinary people who simply lived within that belief day after day, until belief itself changed shape. Time did not punish Axum. It simply continued. That is the most difficult truth to accept, and perhaps the most soothing. Nothing arrived to end the story. Nothing announced that the final page had been turned. The ink just faded. The language softened. The story learned how to whisper, and in that whisper, there is no regret, only acceptance. The kind that comes when a civilization has already given what it was meant to give, coins that taught the world new ways to trade, faith that took root and still breathes, stone that stands even when purpose has slipped away. As night deepens, the highlands seem to close their eyes. The stars hold their ancient positions. The wind slows, satisfied. At last, no longer searching for what cannot be worn again. The silent crown rests where all crowns must eventually rest, not in a treasury, not on a throne, but in the shared, unspoken memory of the land itself. And so the story does not end. It settles, like a final candle flickering low, not extinguished by force, but allowed to dim until its light becomes part of the darkness. Axum sleeps there, beneath sky and stone, teaching the world patiently, endlessly, that even the mightiest voices may one day choose silence, and that silence, too, can be a form of grace. Now, let the night take over. Let the ruins fade gently from view. Let the ancient kingdom remain where it belongs, somewhere just beyond waking thought, alive only in the quiet, where forgotten crowns and unspoken endings finally find their rest. And even now, as the night stretches and the last edges of wakefulness soften, Axum does not retreat. It simply grows more distant, like a shoreline receding into mist. You can sense it without seeing it, the presence of something that once mattered deeply, and still does, though in a quieter way. The earth there holds no resentment. It does not accuse time of theft. It accepts the weight of centuries with the same patience it gives to rain and drought alike. Stone becomes sand, sand becomes soil, and memory, too, changes its form, thinning until it becomes feeling rather than fact. Somewhere beneath the grass, beneath the fallen obelisks and half-buried walls, the rhythm of the old city remains, not as sound, but as cadence, a slow, steady pulse that reminds the land it was once shaped with purpose, that it once stood at the center of many worlds and then chose gently, almost kindly, to step aside. If you listen closely, there is no grief in that choice, only calm, the calm of something complete. Axum does not ask to be restored. It does not hunger for rediscovery. It exists now as a lesson to settle for monuments. That greatness does not always need a monument to survive, and endings do not always need witnesses. So the night closes its circle. The stars keep their vigil. The wind settles into stillness, and the silent crown remains where it has always been unseen, unworn, and undisturbed, resting in the space where history loosens its grip and sleep finally, mercifully, takes over. And when even that thought drifts away, when language itself grows heavy and begins to dissolve, Axum remains only as a sensation, like warmth lingering after a fire has gone out. You do not need to picture the stones anymore. You do not need to remember the names. The kingdom has already done its work. It has shown how time can be kind, how disappearance does not always mean loss, how a civilization may step backward into the earth and still leave the world altered by its passing. The trade routes it shaped no longer answer to its name, yet their paths endure. The faith it embraced still rises in song and silence. The land still carries the imprint of intention. In this final quiet, there is no need for answers. The mystery does not ache, it rests. Axum has become part of the night itself, vast, unhurried, and at peace with not being fully known. The question that once drifted across the highlands no longer seeks resolution. It has softened into acceptance, and so sleep comes, carrying the story with it, folding stone into shadow, shadow into dream. The silent crown is no longer something to search for. It is simply there where all endings eventually go, held gently by time, waiting for nothing at all. And in that waiting, there is a certain sacredness. The land itself seems to breathe, slow and deliberate, as if keeping vigil over a memory too vast to name. The highlands of Ethiopia hold their quiet dominion, folding wind and mist around the remnants of palaces and stelae, letting the kingdom exist as both presence and absence. Axum does not demand our gaze. It simply allows us to sense it, fleetingly, like the ghost of a melody that once stirred hearts and shaped destinies. There is a stillness here that carries its own weight. The quiet is not emptiness, it is depth. It presses against the mind and lingers in the chest, a reminder that the end of power is not always loud. Sometimes it is a long, deliberate exhalation, a kingdom breathing its final sigh into eternity. The obelisks, fractured and leaning, seem almost about toward one another, as if acknowledging the passage of centuries and the passage of people, a communion of stone and time that no conquest can undo. And yet, even in this calm, one feels the echoes of life that once surged through the streets and marketplaces, the clatter of coin, the murmur of councils, the scent of incense and myrrh-faint ghosts that linger in the memory of the earth. Axum's people moved with purpose, built with care, believed in their kings and gods, and trusted that the world would remember them. And though the world has turned, though the empire itself has softened into whispers and ruin, that trust was not misplaced. For memory need not be complete to be meaningful. It only needs to survive. Time has taken much from Axum, but it cannot erase the essence. The silent crown rests still, not atop a head, not displayed in halls, but in the very fabric of the highlands, the rise and fall of hills, the slow march of the seasons, the wind weaving through broken stone. It is a crown of patience, of endurance, of quiet dignity. a testament to a civilization that knew how to leave without violence, to disappear without spectacle, to end not with a scream, but with grace. And now, as night deepens and the body grows heavy with sleep, the mind carries these images softly, letting the silence settle like gentle snow over memory, the stones, the mounts, the crowns, everything that was blends into the quiet rhythm of the world. In that rhythm, there is a lesson that no historian can fully capture, that some kingdoms live not in monuments or chronicles, but in the unspoken, the unseen, and the eternal cadence of time itself. Axum waits there still, beneath stars and mist, beneath wind and shadow, and in that waiting, it teaches the deepest truth of all, that even empires may vanish, yet the grace with which they go can echo forever. And so, as the night deepens further, the ruins of Axum fold entirely into the silence of the highlands, the stones, the toppled stelae, the half-erased inscriptions. They have become part of the land, inseparable from the soil that birthed them and the wind that moves endlessly across their surfaces. There is no hurry here, no urgency to preserve, no compulsion to shout history into the world. Everything rests, and in that rest, everything endures. The empire that once commanded the Red Sea and drew wealth from distant lands now lives only in this quiet persistence. Yet it is not diminished. The absence of spectacle gives it a strange majesty. There is power and restraint in the choice to exist without claiming attention, even in decay. Axum teaches the strength of subtlety, that the most profound legacies do not always require witnesses, that the most enduring crowns may be silent. Walking among these ruins, if one could walk without disturbing the stillness, one might feel the pulse of the city long after its people have gone. It is not a heartbeat of flesh, but of intention, of memory, of lives lived in rhythm with the land and with one another. The commerce, the faith, the governance, the artistry all have seeped into the very bedrock, shaping the mountains and valleys in ways invisible to those who arrive too late. Yet the imprint remains, as palpable as shadow, as gentle as the wind brushing across grass. Perhaps that is the most haunting lesson of Axum, that disappearance need not be violent to be complete. Not all ends announce themselves with fire or sword. Some civilizations fade quietly, almost respectfully, giving the world a chance to notice, if only for a fleeting moment, how impermanent greatness truly is. The silent crown rests in that truth, no longer an object, no longer a symbol of conquest, but a presence intangible, patient, eternal, and as sleep finally takes hold, carrying the mind into dream, the highlands of Ethiopia seem to exhale in unison. The silent crown of Axum does not vanish, it waits, like a final, unspoken blessing, reminding the world that even the mightiest empires may disappear without warning, yet their grace can linger long after the last stone is settled, long after the last name has faded into memory, and long after the wind has whispered through the broken pillars, carrying with it the essence of a kingdom that chose to leave quietly, but never truly left at all. And in that lingering quiet, there is a sense of eternity that no stone alone can convey. The ruins of Axum do not simply mark absence, they mark transformation. Time itself seems gentler here, bending to accommodate the echoes of lives that once shaped oceans and deserts. The winds sweep through valleys and plateaus, brushing the toppled stelae as if to read their faded inscriptions aloud, whispering histories too delicate for fire or conquest to destroy. Even the night sky seems attuned to this lingering presence. Stars above Axum shine with a steadiness that has watched empires rise and fall elsewhere. Yet here, they feel almost sacred, as if the heavens themselves acknowledge the kingdom's quiet entrance. Moonlight spills over broken walls and fallen stones, turning them into silvered memories. Shadows stretch long across the land, connecting the present with centuries long gone, blurring the line between what once was and what continues to exist. In spirit, it is easy, standing among these remnants, if one could stand quietly enough to imagine the pulse of the city in its prime, traders calling out across courtyards, incense curling from temples, the soft clinking of coin in the hands of kings and merchants. And then, gradually, the noises fade, as if swallowed by the patient stones and the highland air. Axum's departure is not sudden, it is a fading symphony, each note dissolving into the next until only the silence remains, and in that silence, the kingdom speaks still. Perhaps the greatest lesson of Axum is not in its wealth, or its faith, or even its power, but in its acceptance of impermanence. There is courage in allowing oneself to dissolve into time, to become part of the earth and wind, to choose subtlety over spectacle, persistence over fame, and for those who wander among the ruins, there is a kind of solace in this. To witness a civilization that mastered the art of vanishing gracefully is to understand that endings can be gentle, endings can be patient, and endings can still carry beauty. The silent crown rests now not upon a head, not within a palace, not in any treasury, but within the memory of the world itself, held tenderly by the land, by the wind, by the stones, and by those who remember in the quiet. Even as sleep deepens, even as consciousness fades, the essence of Axum endures, a kingdom that bensees and deserts, that commanded hearts and minds, yet learned in the end how to bow into silence without losing its dignity. And so, the highlands breathe. The wind shifts over fallen stellae, the stars will slowly above. The memory of Axum's quiet wisdom, its fading brilliance, its eternal crown remains, not as history to be conquered, but as a story to be felt, like a heartbeat beneath the earth, like a shadow beneath the moon, like the hush of the world itself when it pauses, finally, to remember what once was and what will always be, in the quiet, in the stillness, in the invisible, unbroken cadence of time. And in that cadence, one begins to sense something almost sacred, the rhythm of a kingdom that chose patience over pride, continuity over clamor, silence over spectacle. The wind that brushes the ruins is more than air. It is a carrier of memory, a messenger of a civilization that no longer demands attention yet refuses to vanish completely. Each stone seems to exhale stories to settle for chroniclers, stories that drift in the mind like smoke, impossible to grasp fully, yet impossible to ignore. The echoes of Axum linger in ways both tangible and invisible. In the cracked courtyards where children once played, the earth remembers their laughter, faint but persistent. In the shadows of fallen palaces, the stones remember the careful steps of rulers and priests, the measured cadence of power exercised with both reverence and restraint. Even the rivers and gullies seem aware, carrying traces of commerce and devotion to the sea, whispering of a city that spoke to the world without demanding an answer. And yet, perhaps the most haunting element is the absence of finality. Axum does not end in battle, does not collapse in fire. There is no singular catastrophe to mark its passing. Instead, it recedes, slowly, deliberately, like the tide pulling away from a shore that once bore the footprints of giants. Its legacy is not written in conquest, but in presence, in the way a city can endure, even after its inhabitants have dispersed, in the way memory can linger when voices fall silent. There is a lesson in that, quiet and unassuming, for those who listen. Greatness does not always shout. Power does not always leave visible scars. Sometimes, the deepest imprint is left not in gold or blood, but in the soft, unrecorded motions of time, in the careful folding of an empire back into the earth. In the choice to depart without spectacle, Axum's silent crown rests there now. In this space between absence and memory, a testament to the dignity of restraint, the endurance of quiet, and the grace of letting go. As night deepens and sleep gathers its weight, the kingdom becomes even more ethereal. The stars will overhead, the wind carries its ancient whispers, and the land settles. Patient and eternal, the silent crown of Axum is not a relic, nor a symbol of conquest. It is a presence. It is the memory of power exercised without clamor, of life lived with intention, of an empire that learned the ultimate mastery, how to fade from the world, without ever truly leaving it. And as the mind drifts into dreams, it is carried along by that quiet, timeless lesson, held gently in the hush of the highlands, in the breath of the wind, in the unseen but enduring pulse of a kingdom that sleeps, still crowned, beneath the stars. There is a question that hangs in the dry air of the Zimbabwean plateau, drifting like the dust of centuries. How can a city of stone rise from the earth so perfectly, so deliberately, and then vanish into the whispers of the wind? The ruins of great Zimbabwe sit in solemn patience, a labyrinth of walls and enclosures that once echoed with the hum of human ambition. Each stone is worn smooth, yet still deliberate, a testament to hands that shape them with intention, and eyes that imagine permanence in a world that refuses it. It was between the 11th and 15th centuries that great Zimbabwe flourished, a kingdom of immense wealth and intricate social order. Caravans crossed deserts with gold and ivory, the sun gleaming off polished stones and gilded wares, linking this city in the interior with distant coasts and faraway markets. The towers, circular and precise, were not merely dwellings, they were symbols, crowns of stone, asserting authority and devotion in equal measure. From atop the hill complex, one could see the world stretching outward, Savannah meeting sky, the land bending to the vision of those who built this silent empire. Yet the mystery of great Zimbabwe lies not in its stones, but in its absence. There is no written record left behind by its people, the secrets of its rulers, its rituals, the exact nature of its collapse, all have slipped into the fog of time. Archaeologists can reconstruct walls and terraces, trace trade networks, and infer hierarchies. Yet the human pulse behind the stones remains elusive. Why did such a city, so meticulously constructed, decline? Some speak of overgrazed land, dwindling, water, or exhausted soil. Others whisper of internal strife, of dynasties fractured by ambition and betrayal. Perhaps it was plague or famine. Perhaps it was the slow, quiet unraveling that time often performs in silence. Walking among the ruins now, one can almost feel the ebb and flow of lives that have vanished. The circular towers seem to hold conversations with the wind, their contours shaping it, bending it, holding the secrets of generations. Shadows fall across terraces that once rang with footsteps and song, yet there is no sound, only the patient listening of stone. Here, power does not scream, it waits, and in that waiting, it becomes eternal. Great Zimbabwe reminds us that civilizations are not always erased by force. Some fade like twilight, their brilliance refracted into memory and myth. The sunken splendor remains, not as a lesson of ruin, but as a quiet testament to human ambition, ingenuity, and the strange, persistent poetry of absence. Even in silence, even in dust, this kingdom speaks, teaching that grandeur can endure without noise, and that the most haunting legacies are often those left to the wind. The plateau itself seems alive with memory, the ridges and valleys cradle, the remnants of courtyards and passageways, as if the land itself remembers the rhythm of life that once pulsed here. The stone walls rise without mortar, each rock balanced against the next with precision that confounds modern understanding. How did a civilization without written records plan so meticulously? How did they communicate strategy, ritual, and construction? Across generations, the questions drift through the air like sparks from a fading fire, illuminating possibilities that remain forever just out of reach. Caravans once wound their way toward the Indian Ocean, carrying gold mined from nearby rivers, and ivory carved with devotion and artistry. Traders from distant lands came to exchange, to marvel, to touch the pulse of a city that seemed to grow naturally from the earth itself. But as wealth increased, the city's fortunes became entwined with the fragility of human ambition. Did jealousy fester among the ruling elite? Did overreach strain the delicate balance that sustained society? Or did the very hands that built these walls grow tired, leaving the city unfinished in its perfection? No one can say. And that is the most haunting part. The answer is buried not beneath the stones, but in the silence between them. At sunset, the ruins take on a spectral glow. Shadows stretch across the conical towers, tracing curves worn smooth by centuries of wind and sun. The hill complex, the heart of the city, rises like a sentinel, a crown of stone that refuses to fall entirely. One can almost hear whispers of rituals, faint echoes of dances and chants, as if the city is speaking in the language of memory, a language older than words, older than chroniclers. Even the birds, circling above, seem to respect the quiet dignity of this place, tracing arcs through the sky as though honoring the invisible architecture of a vanished society. Great Zimbabwe's mystery is not just in its disappearance, but in the way it lingers unclaimed, uncelebrated, yet undeniable. There is a lesson in that endurance. Power need not leave a trace of conquest or ruin to be felt. The city teaches patience, the patience of stone, of wind, of memory. It asks no witnesses, demands no tribute. Its presence is a quiet, unyielding proof that human ambition, however transient, can leave marks that survive centuries, waiting for those who can perceive them in silence. And as night falls over the plateau, the stars wheel above in indifferent splendor. The wind hums softly through the towers, and the ruins settle into their patient vigil. The sunken splendor of Great Zimbabwe is no longer a place to be walked, but a story to be felt, a kingdom that vanished without spectacle, yet endures through stone, memory, and the quiet poetry of absence. Here, the crown of the city rests, not upon heads or in halls, but within the land itself, whispered to all who come willing to listen. There is a silence in the Taklamakan desert that feels alive, thick with sand and sun, stretching endlessly as if the earth itself is holding its breath. Among these rolling dunes, there once thrived a city whose name was spoken along the Silk Road in whispers of awe and reverence. Khotan, It was a kingdom of jade and silk, a citadel perched at the edge of shifting sands, where oases glimmered like green jewels against a sea of gold, and caravans wound their way through the desert like veins of life flowing across the heart of Asia. Khotan's history is woven of trade and mystery. From the 3rd century BCE onward, it became a thriving hub for merchants and pilgrims. Its markets crowded with jade mined from distant mountains, silk brought from the eastern kingdoms, spices carried over the high passes. Temples rose in intricate lattices, devoted to gods both foreign and familiar, each carved with devotion, each echoing the prayers of generations. The city's walls were formidable, built to withstand not only human foes, but the relentless hunger of the desert itself. And yet, despite its prominence, Khotan's story slips through time like sand through fingers. The city vanished not in conquest, not in fire, but quietly, almost imperceptibly. Some suggest that the desert advanced, swallowing farms and caravan paths, leaving the citadel isolated. Others whisper of political intrigue, kings deposed in silence, alliances broken without announcement, noble houses quietly abandoned. Plague and famine may have crept through its streets like shadowed specters, leaving emptiness where life had pulsed so vigorously before. And perhaps most haunting of all, the city's people themselves seem to melt into the landscape, carrying their culture west and east, scattering Khotan into fragments that survive only in legend, in jade carvings, in whispered tales among traders walking through the ruins today. The wind carries with it echoes of silk brushing against stone, of marketplaces alive with bargaining voices, of the rustle of palm fronds in hidden courtyards. The sun casts long, skeletal shadows across half-buried foundations, revealing outlines of temples and palaces, towers and baths, all obscured by time yet stubbornly present. Every stone seems to ask a question, a riddle of permanence. How can something so meticulous, so alive, vanish without a record? How can civilization dissolve into dust yet linger in memory and myth? Khotan teaches a different kind of endurance than empires known for conquest. Its lesson is subtle. Presence can be as fragile as silk, as fleeting as the shimmer of jade in sunlight, yet it can leave impressions that survive centuries. The shrouded citadel rests now beneath desert winds and endless sky, a monument not of power or wealth, but of the quiet, haunting grace of a city that chose disappearance over spectacle, leaving only the faintest, most exquisite traces of its existence for those willing to listen. And as night falls over the Taklamakan, the stars wheel in their eternal paths, and the desert exhales, the memory of Khotan drifts like a ghost through dunes and ruins, reminding us that civilizations do not always vanish in fire or violence. Some dissolve slowly, leaving only echoes, shadows, and the haunting, eternal poetry of absence. Across the shimmering waves of the Red Sea, where the horizon blurs into heat and salt, there once existed a kingdom spoken of in awe by the Egyptians, a land of incense, gold, and mystery. Punt. Its very name lingers in the hieroglyphs like a secret whispered along temple walls and trade routes. Yet its location has vanished into the sands and the tides. What was Punt, and why does it haunt history with such tantalizing absence? It was during the reign of Pharaoh Hatshepsut in the 15th century BCE that the Egyptians sent grand expeditions in search of Punt's treasures. Ships laden with timber, exotic animals, ivory, ebony, and resins made their way across unfamiliar seas, returning with riches that adorned temples and statues, incense that perfumed rituals, and tales of a land of opulence unlike any other. Punt was more than a trading partner. It was a kingdom of legend, a place where the sun struck golden sands, where mountains hid sacred groves, and where rulers sat upon thrones that glimmered with wealth and authority beyond imagination. And yet, the mystery deepens. Despite its importance, no ruins of Punt have ever been definitively identified. No walls, no palaces, no burial grounds have survived or been found. The kingdom's memory exists only through the accounts of others, sketches in Egyptian reliefs, and the marvel of goods transported across unknown waters. Some say the land of Punt was swallowed by desert, or that its coast shifted, erasing all evidence. Others whisper of internal collapse, of kings who disappeared into intrigue, of dynasties that simply dissolved, leaving their people to scatter into distant lands. Punt's greatness, like mist over the Red Sea at dawn, evaporated quietly, leaving only shimmer and memory behind. Even today, the Red Sea seems to guard its secret, waves murmuring over submerged reefs, winds shaping dunes along coasts that may never be traced. when sunlight strikes the waters just so. One can almost imagine the sails of Hatshepsut's fleet, moving toward a shore that no map can confirm, carrying men who glimpsed a kingdom of wonder and returned with stories half remembered, half lost. Punt teaches us the haunting beauty of absence. Empires do not always fall with fire. Some vanish into imagination, leaving behind traces of their presence that survive only in memory. In trade, in story, its forgotten thrones rest now, not in tombs or halls, but within the imagination of those who listen to the winds across the Red Sea, and in that listening, Punt remains eternal, a kingdom that never demanded to be understood, yet cannot be forgotten. There is a hush that falls over the Mississippi floodplain as the sun dips low, turning river and forest into molten gold. Beneath this quiet lies a city once vast beyond comprehension, yet now swallowed almost entirely by earth and time, Cahokia. Thousands of mounds rise like sleeping giants from the prairie. Their earthen forms the only remnants of a civilization that at its peak, around the 11th century CE, outshone even some of the great cities of Europe in size and complexity. Cahokia thrived along the river's bend, its streets lined with wooden palisades and plazas that pulsed with ceremony and trade. Tens of thousands of people moved through its neighborhoods, guided by social hierarchies and spiritual traditions that remain largely mysterious today. The largest mound, Monk's Mound, towers above the landscape, a testament to human ambition, its terraces rising in stepped grandeur as though to reach the heavens themselves. Artifacts and relics hint at a world of sophisticated craftsmanship, copper ornaments, intricately carved stone effigies, and pottery that conveys symbols whose meanings are now lost. And yet, for all its brilliance, Cahokia disappeared. Its decline was not sudden, but a gradual fading. Scholars debate the causes: overpopulation, depleted soil, flooding, climate change, or internal unrest. Some suggest spiritual upheaval, the breakdown of ritual order, or conflict between rival elites. What is certain is that by the 14th century, Cahokia had emptied, its palisades abandoned, its plazas quiet. The once bustling city became a ghost, its walls overgrown, its people dispersed, leaving behind mounds that resemble graves or temples, yet hold neither body nor clarity. Walking among these remnants, the wind carries whispers of a vanished life. The ground still hums with the rhythm of ceremonies long ended, dances performed under the open sky, voices that once directed labor and worship. The silence is thick, yet eloquent, filled with the weight of human endeavor, with the echo of a people who shaped the land with such precision and care that the earth itself seems to remember their passage. Cahokia's vanished walls are more than ruins. They are a meditation on impermanence, power, culture, and brilliance need not end in fire or conquest to leave a profound mark. The city persists in its absence, teaching that even when voices fall silent and palisades crumble, the essence of human endeavor can endure, whispered through wind and soil, through mountains and rivers, and through the patient listening of those who walk among the earth's quiet testimony. Beyond the dunes of the Arabian Peninsula, where the desert stretches in endless waves of gold and ochre, there was once a city whispered of in awe and fear, Ubar, the fabled Atlantis of the sands. Caravans carried tales of its wealth, precious frankincense, myrrh, and spices that perfumed the air of distant courts, but the city itself remained elusive, as if it were not fully of this world. Generations spoke its name, yet few had seen it, and fewer still returned with more than fragments of story and legend. Ubar flourished at the crossroads of trade, a nexus connecting South Arabia with the Levant and beyond. Its palaces, some said, gleamed under the sun, built from stone and timber, adorned with columns and reliefs depicting rulers and gods. The desert provided both protection and peril, isolating Ubar while concealing it from those who might envy or conquer. Travelers described streets lined with markets, caravans arriving laden with goods from across Arabia and Africa, and temples where incense curled like smoke through towering columns. It was wealth and splendor at the edge of the known world, a city whose prosperity seemed as infinite as the sands that surrounded it. Yet Ubar vanished, swallowed by its own desert. Some accounts speak of collapse due to trade route shifts, of wells drying and caravans choosing other paths. Others whisper of divine wrath, a punishment for hubris. The city's streets swallowed beneath sandstorms, its treasures buried in silence. Modern expeditions, guided by satellite imagery and archaeological forays, have uncovered traces stone, foundations, ancient wells, and roadways, but the true city remains elusive, more ghost than place. More story than reality. Walking among the sparse remnants, one can imagine the wind carrying echoes of laughter, negotiation, and devotion, sweeping across streets now invisible, brushing columns that no longer stand. Ubar's disappearance was not violent. It was patient, methodical, as though the desert itself conspired to reclaim what had been borrowed. The city did not fall. It receded, leaving only whispers and sand in memory. The lost palaces of Ubar are a testament to impermanence and the power of the unseen. Greatness need not shout to exist, and disappearance does not erase presence. Even buried beneath dunes, the essence of the city endures in trade, in legend. In the persistent fascination of those who seek it, Ubar teaches that the desert is both destroyer and guardian, preserving not only what survives above the sand, but the haunting poetry of what is lost, forever lingering at the edge of imagination. High atop a jagged ridge in the Oaxaca Valley, where the morning mist clings, the cliffs like a veil, there lies a city that once crowned the mountains with its stone and ceremony, Monte Alban. Its terraces and plazas stretch across the ridge, a testament to human ingenuity. Yet the heart of the city, the temples, palaces, and tombs that gave it life has long since fallen silent, leaving only the echo of devotion and power etched into the rock. Monte Alban rose around 500 BCE and became the center of the Zapotec civilization, commanding valleys and trade routes, connecting mountains to rivers and rivers to distant coasts. Its plazas once thrummed with ritual dances, the murmur of political councils, and the soft scrape of stone being carved into altars and stelae. The temples, each aligned with sun and shadow, held secrets of astronomy, devotion, and governance that modern eyes can only glimpse, hints of a knowledge that guided the lives of thousands for centuries. Yet, as the centuries passed, Monte Alban waned. By the 9th century CE, the city had been abandoned, its population dispersed across the valley. Why it declined remains uncertain. Some speak of environmental strain, deforestation, soil depletion, or droughts that made the terraces untenable. Others whisper of internal strife, dynastic rivalries, or the slow erosion of centralized authority. There was no cataclysmic conquest, no fire to mark the end, only a quiet exodus, leaving temples to crumble, plazas to fill with grass, and the wind to sweep away the laughter and prayers that once filled the air. Walking among the ruins today, the terraces rise like gentle waves, the stelae casting long shadows over empty plazas. One can almost hear the rhythm of ceremonial drums, the steps of priests, the solemn chants echoing across the valley. The city speaks in silence, not demanding attention, but offering it to those patient enough to notice. The vanished temples hold no roof, no carvings of gods visible in full, yet their essence endures in the stones, aligned with stars, in dialogue with mountains and sky. Monte Alban teaches that civilizations can fade gracefully, leaving no smoke, no ruin, only memory. Woven into the land itself, its vanished temples are not lost, they are present in shadow, in wind, in the patient cadence of earth and stone. The city rests quietly, a crown of memory perched upon the ridge, reminding us that even absence can be magnificent, and that some legacies endure not in record, but in the haunting poetry of what remains unspoken. Amid the rugged hills of central Anatolia, where fog drifts through valleys like restless spirits, lie the ruins of Hattusa, the once great capital of the Hittite Empire. The city sprawled across rocky ridges and river bends, its walls rising in labyrinthine majesty, its gates carved with lions and gods that watched over a people whose power rivaled that of Egypt and Assyria. And yet, for all its grandeur, Hattusa now sleeps beneath a whisper of wind, its story fragmented, its secrets partially swallowed by time. At its height, around 1400 BCE, Hattusa was a city of kings and priests, scribes and warriors. Its streets echoed with the clatter of chariots, the hum of diplomacy, and the measured cadence of religious rituals. Massive fortifications protected, palaces that held treaties, temples where oracles spoke, and archives that recorded the pulse of an empire in cuneiform clay tablets. Hittite influence stretched across Anatolia and beyond, shaping politics, trade, and warfare with a reach both feared and respected. Yet the city's decline is shrouded in uncertainty. Some say famine and drought forced its inhabitants to abandon it, leaving walls and gates intact but hollowed of life. Others speak of invasions, of internal strife, of kings who vanished into intrigue, leaving the city without a hand to guide it. Fires may have consumed parts of the palaces, while the archives, buried in earth, survived only partially. Even the gods, once invoked with ceremony, seem to retreat, leaving the city exposed to the slow erosion of both time and memory. Walking among the ruins today, the massive gates loom like silent sentinels, their carvings worn smooth, yet still. Holding an aura of command, the streets are empty, but the wind carries faint echoes, the distant clash of bronze, the chanting of priests, the solemn march of armies, the temples, now stripped of roof and color, still aligned with solstice and equinox, as if the heavens themselves continue to acknowledge Hattusa's vanished glory. Hattusa teaches the haunting power of impermanence. Its stones endure, yet its people are gone. Its treaties survive in fragments, yet the life that animated them has fled. The city rests now as a testament not to conquest or survival, but to the delicate balance between human ambition and the quiet inevitability of time. The hidden city whispers its lessons to those who wander its ruins, reminding us that even empires, grand and indomitable, may vanish from sight while continuing to speak in the language of shadow, stone, and wind. There is a story carried on the waves of the Baltic Sea, whispered from one generation of fishermen to the next, of a city so grand it rivaled the heavens, yet punished for its pride, swallowed by the sea in a single, silent night. Veneta, they say, was a metropolis of wealth, spires, and bustling markets, a kingdom where merchants prospered. Temples rose in gold and stone, and life pulsed with the certainty of fortune. Yet now, only the sea remembers, and only in fragments, teasing the imagination with what was once magnificent. Veneta is said to have flourished during the Middle Ages, somewhere along the southern coast of the Baltic, where rivers met the sea, bringing trade from the inland and the world beyond. Ships carried amber, furs, and salt, and the city's streets were alive with voices bargaining, merchants laughing, and the distant tolling of bells that marked the rhythm of civic and spiritual life. Its rulers were famed for their wealth and ambition, their courts glittering with gold and jewel, their influence extending across coastal lands and riverine kingdoms alike. And yet, Veneta disappeared. Some legends speak of divine punishment, a city condemned for hubris and moral decay, swallowed by the waters it once commanded. Others suggest more natural causes, floods, shifting sands, or the rise of tides that claim streets and markets alike. Chroniclers describe ships returning to empty harbors, streets submerged under brine, and spires that vanish beneath waves. Even in memory, the city resists concreteness, maps place it vaguely, stories drift between fact and myth, and no wall, no tower, no tomb has been definitively unearthed to anchor Veneta in certainty. Walking along the shores where it may have stood, the wind carries a cold, briny whisper, the echo of commerce, laughter, and lament. Sand shifts over what may have been streets, and waves lap where houses once rose, hiding the past beneath a restless, shimmering surface. The sea both preserves and erases, reminding the living that even human grandeur cannot withstand the patient insistence of nature. Veneta teaches the fragility of splendor. A kingdom can rise, flourish, and disappear without warning, leaving only stories, echoes, and the haunting beauty of absence. Its sunken streets are not lost, they are present in the rhythm of the waves, in the sigh of the wind, and in the imagination of those who dare to listen. The city rests beneath water now, crowned not in stone or gold, but in myth, and in that quiet submersion, Veneta endures forever untouchable, untamed, and hauntingly eternal. Far across the waves of the Pacific, where the horizon blurs into blue infinity, there exists an archipelago that cradles a city unlike any other, Nanmadel, a kingdom of stone rising from the sea itself. Its temples and palaces are built upon a labyrinth of artificial islets, separated by narrow canals that gleam like molten silver under the sun. Here, in the remote lagoon of Pompeii, a civilization sculpted the very ocean into its throne, and yet today, only silence answers where once chants and footsteps echoed. Nanmadel emerged around the 1st century CE, becoming the ceremonial and political center of the Sotalar dynasty. Its rulers were said to govern with absolute authority, their presence as commanding as the stones they piled into impossibly massive walls. Some of the basalt columns, transported from quarries miles away, weigh tens of tons, yet rise in precise alignment, forming temples, tombs, and palaces that defy both logic and the limits of imagination. The canals themselves carried canoes, connecting the city like veins in a living body, a network of movement and purpose that sustained the dynasty's dominance. And yet, the kingdom vanished. Scholars suggest ecological strain, overpopulation, or internal revolt, but no definitive answer has been found. The last settler rulers disappeared, leaving the city abandoned to the tides and wind. Legends tell of curses, of oppression, of spiritual wrath that drove the people away, and of a land so haunted that its stones now absorb the whispers of the past. Today, the canals are choked with silt, the walls collapse slowly into the lagoon, and the sea laps against structures that once echoed with power, ceremony, and devotion. Walking among the ruins, one feels the pulse of human ingenuity and ambition. The basalt stones hum with memory, the water glimmers with reflected history, and the wind carries the faint echo of ceremonial drums, the laughter of inhabitants, the solemnity of rulers walking upon their floating city. Nan Madol is both monument and mystery, impossible to fully grasp, yet undeniable in presence a kingdom that defied nature and then yielded to it in silence. The forgotten temples of Nan Madol teach that endurance is not always measured in conquest, but in the audacity to shape the impossible, even abandoned, even partially submerged. The city remains a testament to human creativity, devotion, and the haunting poetry of absence. Here, the past whispers through stone and water, and those who listen may understand that the most profound legacies are often those left quietly, where civilization and nature converge in a rhythm as eternal as the tides themselves. Beneath the waters of modern Mexico City, the ghost of a city rises in memory, its canals and causeways still whispering the rhythm of a vanished empire. Tenochtitlan, capital of the Mexico later called the Aztecs, was a jewel on a lake, a labyrinth of stone, water, and devotion, and yet, despite its splendor, it fell, not only to the violence of conquest, but also into the quiet permanence of absence, leaving only traces for those willing to see beyond the surface. Founded in the early 14th century on the swampy waters of Lake Texcoco, Tenochtitlan was a marvel of ingenuity. Canals served as streets, transporting goods and people in a harmony of commerce and ritual. Temples rose like mountains from the water, their steps climbed by priests and rulers alike, offering sacrifices that the Mexica believed nourished the sun and preserved the cosmos. Markets brimmed with maize, cacao, feathers, and obsidian. The heart of a city pulsating with energy, negotiation, and devotion. Its rulers, crowned with Quetzal feathers, wielded power both earthly and divine, balancing tribute, warfare, and faith in a fragile, complex harmony. Then came 1521, and the city's fate shifted. Hernan Cortez and his allies breached causeways and canals, bringing destruction in fire, steel, and disease. Yet even as Tenochtitlan fell, it did not vanish immediately. For months, its people resisted. Rivers ran with the life of the fallen and the desperate, and the smoke of temples mingled with the lake's mist. When the city finally surrendered, much was lost, but memory endured. The stone foundations, the outlines of palaces, the bones of its dead, and the haunting knowledge of a city that had been impossibly alive. Walking today along the remnants beneath the modern metropolis, one can sense the pulse of Tenochtitlan in the rhythm of streets that mirror canals, in plazas that align with the sun, and in ruins uncovered beneath concrete. Its shadow endures. In every artifact, every map, every whispered story, a testament to resilience and ingenuity. The shadowed streets of Tenochtitlan remind us that civilization's fall is never absolute. Even in defeat, even under layers of sediment and city, the essence persists. It teaches that power, culture, and memory can survive the sweep of time, lying quietly beneath the surface, waiting for those who are willing to pause, listen, and hear the ghostly heartbeat of a kingdom that once ruled the waters, the sun, and the hearts of its people. Far to the north, where icy winds scoured the rugged coastlines of Newfoundland and Labrador, there lies a land whispered about in Norse sagas, Vinland. It was a place of promise, a forest heavy with grapes and rivers shimmering with fish, where the earth seemed generous and the horizon endless. Yet the settlements of the Vikings, brief and fleeting, vanished almost entirely, leaving behind only fragments of dwellings, fire pits, and the haunting echo of footsteps across fields now wild with grass and snow. Around the turn of the 11th century, Norse explorers ventured west from Greenland, crossing tempestuous seas in longships that cut through waves like blades. Led by figures whose names have become myth, Leif Erikson, Thorfinn Karlsefni, they established small colonies along sheltered bays, trading with the indigenous peoples, hunting, and attempting to plant farms. Timber was harvested, houses were raised with turf and stone, and for a time, the settlers seemed to carve permanence from an untamed landscape. The land promised abundance, and with it, a vision of expansion that glimmered across the cold northern seas. Yet Vinland never endured. Hostile weather, isolation, and conflict with local peoples made survival precarious. Winter storms swept across the coastline. Rivers froze and crops failed. The settlements were abandoned, their timber and stones reclaimed by the forest, leaving only faint depressions and hearths as testimony. Norse sagas speak of the hardships with a poetic melancholy, recounting the fleeting joy of summer harvests, the terror of storms, and the difficult choice to leave a land whose beauty belied its cruelty. Finland became a memory preserved in oral tradition and sparse archaeological remains, a place both real and legendary. Walking among the coastal ruins today, one feels the chill of the Atlantic winds, hears the whisper of waves over stones that once formed hearths, and senses the ghost of a settlement that tried and failed to bend nature to human will. The land is quiet, yet full of presence, a reminder that some kingdoms exist only in the tension between ambition and the inexorable force of environment. The vanished citadel of Vinland teaches the ephemeral nature of human endeavor. Even when dreams are bold, even when settlements rise with care and hope, some places refuse permanence. Yet in their brief lives, they leave lessons in courage, resilience, and the haunting poetry of disappearance echoing across centuries like the wind that scours the northern coasts, whispering the memory of a kingdom that touched the edge of the world and vanished, leaving only legend in its wake. Along the twisting banks of the Ganges, where the river cuts through fertile plains and morning mists curl like smoke over the water, there once rose a city of astonishing magnitude, Pataliputra. It was the beating heart of empires, a nexus of politics, commerce, and culture. Yet today, much of its grandeur lies hidden beneath layers of earth, waiting to whisper its stories to those patient enough to uncover them. Founded over 2 millennia ago, Pataliputra became the capital of dynasties that shaped the Indian subcontinent, the Mauryas and the Guptas. Its streets thrummed with traders from across Asia, scholars debating philosophy under shaded courtyards, and courtiers moving in ritualized rhythm through palaces adorned with carved pillars and frescoes. Accounts tell of massive wooden walls reinforced with stone, towers that caught the morning sun, and gates so grand they seemed to frame the very sky itself. This city was alive with knowledge, devotion, and ambition, a place where the pulse of civilization could be felt in every step along its streets. Yet even such grandeur proved impermanent. By the early medieval period, Pataliputra's palaces and temples had begun to crumble. Floods from the Ganges, invasions by outsiders, and the slow erosion of political authority led to its gradual abandonment. Unlike cities destroyed in a single cataclysm, Pataliputra faded slowly, its streets reclaimed by silt and vegetation, its temples buried beneath the weight of time and water. Archaeologists uncover relics, coins, pottery, remnants of walls, but the full city remains a phantom, a skeleton of memory beneath the earth. Walking along the modern banks, one can almost imagine the bustling plazas, the chatter of scholars, the aroma of spices, incense, and freshly baked bread. The river carries echoes of ceremonies and processions, of dynasties asserting their might, and of common people whose lives were intertwined with the fate of kings. Each artifact recovered feels like a breath of life from a city long vanished, a fragment of a pulse that once resonated across centuries. The buried temples of Pataliputra teach a subtle, haunting lesson. Civilizations do not always end with fire and ruin. Sometimes they dissolve quietly, leaving traces for the attentive to perceive. In the layers of earth and memory, Pataliputra endures, not as a city of stone alone, but as a testament to the impermanence and persistence of human ambition, echoing through the river's eternal flow, waiting for those who listen to the rhythm of a civilization that once ruled, thrived, and quietly receded into legend. Even in the quiet of the African plateau, where the wind bends the tall grasses and sun burns the earth to gold, the remnants of great Zimbabwe rise like ancient sentinels, their stone walls curving and spiraling in impossible perfection. Here, centuries ago, a kingdom flourished with a wealth and vision that defied the surrounding savanna. Yet now it speaks only in whispers, in the shadows of the towers, and in the spaces between stones, where human ambition once pressed itself into permanence. Between the 11th and 15th centuries, Great Zimbabwe was the heart of a vast trade network, linking the interior of southern Africa with coastal ports, and through them, with the world beyond. Gold, ivory, and exotic goods moved through its marketplaces. Artisans carved stone and iron with extraordinary skill. Rulers held courts that displayed both power and devotion. Circular towers rose with deliberate precision, not merely as dwellings, but as symbols of authority, connecting the earthly and the divine. The city's pulse could be felt in the rhythmic labor of its inhabitants, the cadence of ceremonies, and the constant movement of traders across winding paths and terraces. Yet over time, the city faded. Scholars debate the causes: environmental stress, overpopulation, political upheaval, or the simple exhaustion of resources. There was no violent conquest, no single cataclysmic moment. Instead, the inhabitants dispersed, leaving walls, towers, and terraces to endure the quiet patience of centuries. Even the palaces and sacred enclosures were gradually claimed by earth, a wind, their presence lingering as a faint heartbeat beneath the grass and dust. Walking among these ruins today, one feels the scale of human endeavor, the deliberate artistry of stone shaped to last forever, yet vulnerable to time. Shadows fall across the circular towers, tracing curves designed to impress, to intimidate, and to connect with the heavens. The air carries faint echoes of trade, of ceremonies performed with devotion, and of voices long silenced by history. Every stone seems to hum with memory, asking questions about impermanence, legacy, and the fragile grandeur of human life. Great Zimbabwe teaches that civilizations need not collapse with drama. To leave their mark, power and ambition can dissolve into quiet absence, yet still resonate across centuries through stone, memory, and the poetry of silence. The silent citadels endure not as monuments of conquest, but as reflections of human aspiration, reminding us that even when kingdoms vanish, their essence can persist, waiting patiently for those willing to listen to the lingering heartbeat of a forgotten world. In the dense, humid jungles of Cambodia, where vines twist around stone like living threads and mist drifts over lotus-filled moats, there lies a city that once rivaled the heavens, Angkor. Its temples and palaces rise in solemn grandeur, towers piercing the sky, bas-reliefs etched with gods, kings, and battles that have long since faded into silence. For centuries, Angkor was the heart of the Khmer Empire, a kingdom so vast and sophisticated that even the forest seems humbled by its scale. Founded in the 9th century CE, Angkor became a nexus of devotion, administration, and culture. Canals and reservoirs, engineered with precision, carried water across the city, feeding rice paddies and sustaining millions. Monumental temples, most famously Angkor Wat, were aligned with celestial patterns, their stones capturing both light and shadow to tell stories of divinity and power. Markets and courts thrived, scholars debated philosophy, priests performed rites that echoed through vast halls, and kings adorned themselves with gold, jade, and ceremonial regalia, asserting dominion over both earth and spirit. Yet by the 15th century, the city began to fade. Deforestation, changing water patterns, and climatic stress weakened the agricultural lifelines. Internal strife and invasions compounded the struggle, and the Khmer rulers eventually abandoned the city, leaving temples to crumble beneath jungle canopies. The forest reclaimed stone walls, canals filled with silt, and statues of gods were overgrown by roots and moss. Angkor's disappearance was gradual, silent, yet profound, a civilization slipping away under its own ambition and the inexorable patience of nature. Walking among these ruins today, the air is thick with the perfume of damp earth and flowering vines. Sunlight filters through branches, casting intricate shadows over carvings of apsaras frozen in eternal dance. The wind carries faint echoes of ceremonies, the rhythm of rituals, and the laughter of a people long gone. Every stone, every pillar, every moss-covered carving hums with memory, a reminder that human grandeur is both fragile and eternal, present in absence as much as in presence. The lost temples of Angkor teach the haunting poetry of impermanence. Even the mightiest kingdoms may yield to time and nature, yet their spirit endures, carved into stone, aligned with the cosmos and whispered through the forest. Here, in the quiet grandeur of ruins and vines, one can feel the pulse of a civilization that touched both earth and sky. A kingdom that vanished yet remains immortal in the haunting rhythm of memory and silence. In the dawn mist of northern Thailand, where rivers glint like molten silver and the hum of cicadas fills the air, there lies the memory of a city that once gleamed with golden light. Sukhothai. It was a kingdom born from rebellion and vision, rising in the 13th century to craft an identity distinct from empires to the north and west. Today, its temples stand half-sunken in ponds. Statues smile enigmatically from moss-covered pedestals, and the air hums with a quiet reverence. As if the kingdom itself lingers in the hush between sunlight and shadow, Sukhothai flourished as the cradle of Thai culture, its rulers cultivating art, language, and religion with deliberate care. Terraces and canals structured the city, while temples were adorned with sculptures of Buddhas and poses that conveyed serenity, devotion, and cosmic order. The kingdom's kings were patrons of learning and architecture, commissioning works that harmonized human craft with the rhythms of nature. Markets, royal courts, and ceremonial spaces thrived, each movement of the city guided by a balance of power, faith, and beauty. Yet, as with all kingdoms, Sukhothai's brilliance faded. By the late 14th century, its political power waned. Absorbed gradually into the rising Ayutthaya kingdom, the city was neither burned nor conquered with fury. Instead, it receded quietly, leaving its temples and palaces to the slow embrace of ponds, soil, and vegetation. Floods reshaped the land, trade shifted to new centers, and the people dispersed, taking culture and memory with them. Archaeological remnants, stone stupas, chetas, inscriptions offer tantalizing glimpses. But the life that animated the city has long since vanished, leaving only the soft resonance of presence and absence. Walking through Sukhothai today, one senses the rhythm of a city still alive in memory. The gentle ripple of water reflects temple spires. The wind carries whispers of prayers and laughter, and moss-covered stone hums with centuries of devotion. The air is heavy with stillness, yet vibrant with echoes of what once was a kingdom that sought not only survival, but harmony with the world around it. The forgotten kingdom of Sukhothai reminds us that civilizations need not vanish with violence to endure in legend. Its silence is a language of resilience and artistry, of fleeting power and enduring beauty. Even in absence, Sukhothai persists in stone, water, and memory, a kingdom suspended between earth and sky, teaching that true legacy often whispers rather than shouts, inviting those who wander through its ruins to hear the quiet heartbeat of a civilization that once shone like gold in dawn. Beneath the rolling prairies along the Mississippi River, where the wind carries the scent of earth and grass, lie the remains of a city that once rivaled the largest settlements of the ancient world, Cahokia. Its mounds rise like echoes of forgotten ambition, earthen pyramids shaped by human hands, silent now, yet resonating with the energy of thousands who lived, labored, and worshipped here nearly 1,000 years ago. At its peak, around 1050 CE, Cahokia was a metropolis of remarkable scale. Tens of thousands of people inhabited the sprawling city, organized into clans and hierarchies that managed trade, agriculture, and ritual. Monk's Mound, the largest structure, rises over 100 feet, a monumental testament to human ambition, possibly crowned by the resonance of a ruler or the stage of ceremonies that shaped the rhythm of the city's life. Plazas bustled with traders exchanging copper, shells, and crafted goods, while religious leaders conducted ceremonies designed to honor the spirits of earth, sun, and river. Every movement, every construction was a deliberate act of social and cosmic order, binding the city together with invisible threads of ritual and governance. Yet by the 14th century, Cahokia began to fade. The causes are as enigmatic as the city itself: overpopulation, deforestation, soil exhaustion, climatic shifts, or perhaps internal conflict. Whatever the reasons, the metropolis emptied, its palisades decayed, its plazas were overgrown, and the people dispersed across the region. No fire consumed it. No invaders raised it. Cahokia simply receded, leaving the earth to reclaim its memory. Today, mounds remain as silent witnesses, whispering hints of ceremonies, markets, and lives once vibrant. Walking among these remnants, the wind carries a rhythm that feels like the pulse of the city itself. Shadows stretch across terraces, and the river murmurs beneath the sun, as if recounting tales of rituals, labor, and devotion long extinguished. The silence is profound, yet eloquent, offering insight into a society that balanced ambition and ritual, survival and vision. The vanished kingdom of Cahokia reminds us that civilizations can disappear. Without the drama of conquest or collapse, their legacy endures in earth, stone, and memory, whispering across centuries to those who listen. Even in absence, Cahokia's pulse survives, a testament to the fleeting yet resonant imprint of human endeavor on the world, and a meditation on the enduring poetry of civilizations that fade, leaving only echoes beneath the prairie wind. Far to the north, beyond the edge of maps drawn by ancient hands, lies the mythic land of Thule, a place described in whispers by Greek and Roman explorers, imagined as the northernmost reaches of the world. Frosted seas, jagged cliffs, and endless winter dominate this horizon. A kingdom that existed at the edge of knowledge and yet vanished into obscurity, leaving only speculation, legend, and the faint traces of human habitation in the ice and stone. Though it was spoken of as a land of extremes, where the sun barely touched the horizon in winter and shone endlessly in summer, where hardy peoples lived in harmony with ice, rock, and wind. Ancient texts hint at trade in amber, furs, and perhaps even rare metals, with travelers describing settlements of wooden longhouses clustered along fjords, smoke curling from chimneys like fingers into the frozen sky. It was a world where survival was both sacred and brutal, where the land demanded vigilance, courage, and ingenuity from those daring enough to live at the limits of the known earth. Yet, for all its mystery, though vanished from recorded memory, some suggest climate change, the slow advance of ice, or shifting ocean currents made habitation untenable. Others imagine migration as communities abandon harsh coasts for warmer lands. Taking their stories and culture with them, archaeology offers tantalizing hint stools, hearths, and scattered remnants of settlement, but nothing that definitively anchors Thule in space or time. The kingdom exists primarily in the imaginations of those who read the sagas, a place that is both real and allegorical, a boundary between earth and myth. Walking along these northern shores today, one senses the immense quiet of a land that defies permanence. Wind scours cliffs, waves lap against hidden fjords, and ice glints under low sun, preserving secrets in its crystalline silence. One can imagine the rhythm of life that once existed, the hum of community, the careful tending of hearths, the prayers whispered to gods of survival and fate. The land is both inhospitable and awe-inspiring, a reminder of human ambition pressed against the edge of nature's patience. The forgotten shores of Thule teach that some kingdoms vanish not because of conquest, but because the world itself demands it. Their memory lingers in legend and fragments of tools. In the whispers of wind across ice and stone, Thule endures. In imagination, a kingdom at the edge of the world, reminding us that the most haunting empires may be those that vanish quietly, leaving only the poetry of absence and the echo of lives lived on the very fringe of the known earth. Along the sun-scorched sands of the Nile's eastern deserts, where the river's life-giving waters give way to endless ochre dunes, lie the ruins of Meroe, a kingdom that once stretched across the lands of Nubia, rising in majesty and then vanishing into silence. Its pyramids, smaller than those of Egypt but no less enigmatic, stand like watchful sentinels, their sharp shadows stretching across a landscape that remembers little else of the civilization that once thrived here. Meroe flourished between the 8th century BCE and the 4th century CE, becoming the heart of the kingdom of Kush. Its kings and queens ruled with authority, managing trade across the Sahara and along the Nile, connecting Africa's interior to the Mediterranean world. Iron smelting, pottery, and elaborate jewelry marked the sophistication of Meroe's artisans, while temples dedicated to gods of war, fertility, and the sun bore testimony to a spiritual life deeply intertwined with power. The city's palaces and royal courts hung with diplomacy, ritual, and governance, and the pyramids held the remains of rulers whose names and deeds are now partially lost to the desert wind. Yet, like so many kingdoms, Meroe faded into quiet obscurity. Shifts in trade routes, ecological pressures, and possible internal turmoil led to its decline. The desert crept closer, sand swallowing streets and fields, rivers shifting course, and the people dispersing to other regions. Unlike the dramatic collapses chronicled in history, Meroe's end was patient and silent, leaving behind pyramids, scattered temples, and inscriptions that hint at the glory once held here. Even the mighty Nile could not preserve the heartbeat of a city that time had chosen to reclaim. Walking among Meroe's ruins today, the heat of the sun casts the pyramid's shadows like ancient crowns on the sand. The wind whispers across fallen stone, carrying faint echoes of royal procession, the chanting of priests, and the quiet conversations of citizens long gone. Every column, every carved relief, every sun-baked brick hums with memory, connecting the present with a civilization that understood the delicate balance between ambition and the enduring patience of the earth. The silent thrones of Meroe remind us that empires can vanish without fanfare, leaving only fragments to speak across millennia. Yet even in absence, their spirit endures in stone, sand, and memory. Meroe teaches that kingdoms, no matter how mighty, are as fragile as the desert wind, but the poetry of their existence carved into pyramids, whispered through ruins, remains eternal, a testament to humanity's capacity to rise, flourish, and vanish with a dignity that resonates far beyond the reach of time itself. Asterisk.